there's a wonderful saying that goes, safety is not the absence of danger. Safety is the presence of predictability. When we perceive that we can predict that somebody's behavior won't hurt us, we feel safe around them. There are a lot of very, very different people out there. And I am one of a small group of people who have my personality type, approximately 2-3% of the planet. And that means that I'm not going to be right for everybody, and that's okay. And I think it started with doing a lot of healing work and therapy on myself that I learned that I'm okay.
Hi guys, this is Kristina Mand-Lakhiani and welcome to my honest conversation. Today I have a very interesting guest. I hope I'll pronounce my guest's family name properly, but I'll make an effort. It's Bruce Muzik. Is it more or less there? Okay.
You got it, Bruce Muzik. People call me Muzik, but great.
Yes, it's a complicated name. I'm happy I'm not the only one with a complicated name. So Bruce, welcome to my honest conversations, and thanks for finding time. And just before we started recording, Bruce was sharing how he's staying illegally in Chile due to being stuck, in fact.
Yes, with COVID.
Which I absolutely related to because I had this situation. But you know, since we started talking about that, I want to go straight into the fight because Bruce is known as, well, Bruce's topic is relationships. And I want to, I understand that you think that the key component of a relationship, of a successful relationship, is communication. So I want to ask you, since we were talking about lockdown, about being, you know, not where we want to be, how do you think is our ability to connect going to be affected by what had happened to us in the past half year?
So firstly, can I just clarify what you said? Because you just said a second ago, I thought I heard that you said that I think that the key to successful relationships is communication. Is that what you said?
That's what I read out of your biography, yes.
Ah, okay. So actually, I don't think the key to successful communication as relationships is communication. I think it's connection.
Connection.
And
yes,
one of the things I've discovered over 10 years of working with several thousand couples, helping them with conflict. My specialty is conflict. So I help couples who are struggling, mostly couples in long-term committed relationships. I realized very early on that communication skills sometimes worked and sometimes didn't, depending on how connected the couple were. So when the couple were connected, they'd use a simple communication skill like, when you do X, I feel Y. And it would be like, you know, when you don't take out the trash, I feel sad and disconnected from you. And that's how it's designed to be worked, to stop people pointing fingers and blaming. But when a couple was disconnected, which is 90% of the couples that I work with, it turned into something like, when you don't take out the trash, I think you're just a jerk. And then, of course, the communication tool just became a weapon to empower the couple to better hurt each other. So I started thinking there must be a better way. And as I got into learning more about attachment theory, I realized that the reason why my couples were fighting and their conflict, their communication skills weren't working is because they didn't feel safely connected to each other. They were relating to their partner as the enemy and going to war against the enemy instead of relating to their partner as their teammate and communicating as if they're their teammate. So couples come to me all the time and say, Bruce, we need communication skills. All we do is fight. Please, will you help us? And I kind of playfully joke with them saying, well, can you guys speak English? They look at me as if to say, obviously. I'm like, okay. Did you guys have any problem communicating when you were falling in love? And they were like, no, it was totally fine. So it's like, okay, so you know how to communicate and you both speak English and you've never had a problem before. Why do you think communication is the problem? That's the symptom. The actual cause is a lack of emotional connection. So I coined the phrase, connect first, communicate later. And the premise of all the work I do with couples is getting them connected first and only then helping them communicate. So communication is important, but it needs to be preceded by a healthy dose of connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, I mixed my C words. But yeah, so the question is still, do you think this experience of the past half a year, and we don't know how long it's going to last, is going to impact our ability to connect? We've been physically disconnected, and sometimes we've been physically connected to the people we don't want to be connected.
Exactly. I think it has in both positive and negative ways. I think for many of us, we've had to find creative ways to connect. So we're reaching out more on Zoom, on WhatsApp, on video chat, FaceTime, and we're forced to connect. As many of us thought this was going to last a few weeks, and it's turned out to last a few months. I know for me personally, I do feel disconnected. I miss my friends. I miss my mom, and I'm making an extra special effort to stay in touch with my family, much more than I would have before, when I knew I could just get in an airplane and go and visit them when I miss them. Now I can't. I mean, I wake up every day thinking about my mom, worried that she's 83 years old, and if she gets COVID, she'll die, and I won't be able to fly to South Africa to go and say goodbye to her. And so I'm like communicating even more than I ever did and reaching out to my friends. So for me personally, I can't speak for everybody else. I'm connecting more than I might normally have connected.
But we definitely appreciate the connection a little more, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're getting too much closeness with our loved ones that we're living with at home, because we're spending so much time at home. It's almost like we're overly connected, if there is such a thing. We spend so much time close together, and it's hard to take time apart if you're in lockdown, that it's almost like we're craving to get away from the people that we live with so that we can have a little bit of autonomy and feel independent again.
So you just said we're connecting a little too much with people that we love. Is there such thing?
I don't know. That was the first thing that popped into my head as I thought about your question for the first time.
Yeah.
I think there's a distinction between feeling safe and connected to each other, and then spending too much time together. And I think when we spend too much time with somebody, the balance between autonomy and communion, which is basically the balance between being a me and being a we, gets weighted in the direction of we, too much we, and not enough me. And I think that's what happens in life. We all have to balance our private time with our communal time, our sense of I'm an individual with a sense of I'm part of a group or part of a family or part of a relationship. And because of lockdown and quarantine, many of us have spent so much time at home with our families. We've been spending far too much time in the we space, and we're craving time in the me space, particularly introverts. So I don't know about how you do it with your family, but we've been kind of creating agreements around, like my stepdaughter, she locks herself in her bedroom and doesn't come out for 6 hours a day. She's an introvert and she needs her me time. My stepson, who's 23 now, he is an extrovert. He craves we time. So we've built rituals around coming together for breakfast, coming together for lunch, and coming together for dinner, so that he can get his sense of me time. And we're trying to balance the two and keep it kind of in the middle rather than skewed to one side.
So, I was thinking of this, when we talk about connection, it is obviously a two-sided story. There is me with my needs and my expectations, and there's this other side. We are not always on the same wavelength, or not always with the same background. So are you able to make connections with anyone you truly care about and love, or there has to be some kind of compatibility for a true connection?
It's a good question. And I think the answer is it depends on both of you. I think on average, yes. With most people, connection is the result of a felt sense of safety combined with community. Like, I feel safe with you. I know you're not going to hurt me. You're not going to embarrass me. You're not going to make fun of me on camera. So I feel like you and I are going to connect pretty easily. And then values. If our values are similar, we're probably going to have a greater chance of connecting. But I think connection can be created very quickly. Well, it's been my experience, and I'm working with highly conflictual couples, couples that are fighting, couples that are on the brink of divorce, and I can help them connect. And the way that I often go about that is in ways that are unconscious. So I'll use touch, I'll use eye contact, I'll use appreciation, I'll use techniques like having shared experiences together to help a couple connect. And I think the most important ingredient in connection is safety. If I feel safe with you, odds of connection happening naturally are going to be a lot higher. And I personally believe connection is our natural state when safety is present.
So we naturally want to connect to other people.
I believe so, yeah.
I'll ask a slightly a question maybe out of my personal experience. I know that for me, in a relationship, it's very, probably the most painful experience is not to be noticed. And while I might feel safe with a person because I know the person, I trust the person, but I've also noticed, you know what children do when children are naughty is because they want attention. So I've noticed in my own past experience is when I feel lack of connection, it also often erupts into some kind of drama because I need the reassurance that I'm being seen and heard. So is that something common, or is it me just being a child, and what do I do with this need to be noticed?
Okay, perfect. So yes, it is common, and you're not alone. I am also like that. And if it's okay with your permission, could I offer you an insight, perhaps?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you.
That's the point of our conversation.
Well, I mean, a personal insight rather than a collective one. Okay. Well, let's see if we can make it collective. So if you ever read about attachment theory, have you ever heard of attachment theory or read anything about attachment?
Yes, I've heard. I do not know much about it.
Okay, it's I can give it to you in 2 minutes in very simple language, and it's one of the most amazing set of distinctions that explains our human condition better than any other set of distinctions I've come across so far. The idea is essentially this: love is a survival bond. It was wired into us by nature to ensure that a couple stayed together because two is better than one. Imagine you and I are caveman and cavewoman on the plains of Africa, and you have a baby, and we have a baby together. You are incapable of hunting for your own food because you need to look after the baby. And if you hunt with the baby will cry and make a noise, will alert the animals that you're hunting, and you won't get any food. And if you leave the baby behind, the baby will cry and the animals will eat the baby. So you have to stay with the baby, and I, as the man, have to go out and hunt. And if I leave you and abandon you, you will die and the baby will die. And if I leave you and abandon you, the human race will effectively go extinct if babies die and couples stop reproducing. So nature wires in this natural bond between two types of people: partners in love romantic relationships, and parents and their offspring, to keep the family unit together, to continue the evolution of the human race. That's what the evolutionary biologists will tell you. Okay. So love is a survival bond, and seen through that lens, it's actually a very useful way of explaining the feelings we feel in love. So attachment theory has discovered that there are essentially two ways you can be bonded to each other, and they call this securely attached and insecurely attached. Approximately 50% of the population are securely attached, and then certainly in America, and approximately 50% of the population are insecurely attached. Securely attached means I feel safe in relationships. I trust I can depend on my partners to be there for me, to have my back, and I can trust that I'll be there for others and have their back. This comes from having a family unit where you grew up having your needs met, and when you were in distress, your parents regularly came and provided emotional as well as physical support, protection, comfort, and you grew up trusting that the world is a safe place and I'm happy. If
Mm-hmm.
you were one of those lucky people, just thank your lucky stars. I wasn't. I grew up insecurely attached. I had parents who loved me dearly, but weren't available for me emotionally when I most needed them, mostly before the age of 18 months of age. So you can, broadly speaking, divide insecurely attached people into two categories, what I call hailstorms and turtles. Hailstorms, which I'm going to guess is you and I, are the category that feel anxious about our attachment bond, our love bond. Our greatest fear is being abandoned. And we want to know that we are important to the people who we love and who love us, because we didn't feel that way securely, that way over the continuation of our childhood. As children, we were anxious about our sense of security with our caregivers, or we were anxious in that we didn't quite trust that our caregivers would always be there for us to look after our emotions if we got into a difficult place. So we grow up into adults that don't trust our partners to be there for us, and we're constantly on the lookout. Well, will you be there for me? Am I safe with you? And when we're in distress, we tend to get all worked up. And instead of being direct about, hey, honey, I feel insecure and I feel anxious. Please, could you give me a hug and tell me that you love me? We'll go, well, where were you last night? Who's that person on your Facebook wall? Why are you looking at a pretty girl's picture? It's called protest behavior. And it's essentially an indirect attempt to try and get your need for attention or reassurance met. But of course, it never works the way we hope it would. It just ends up coming across to our partner like criticism, or like we're being demanding, and our partner then retreats from us and withdraws. And this, of course, triggers our fear of abandonment, which makes us escalate more, and then our partner withdraws more, and then we escalate more. So I call this person the hailstorm, because it's like they're hailing down on their turtle partner. Commonly, the other partner, because hailstorms tend to attract turtles, is the turtle who had no emotional support when they were young. Their parents commonly believed that children should be seen and not heard. They thought that, if we leave you alone when you're in distress, you'll become stronger and you'll learn to deal and cope with your difficult feelings on your own, which is not the case. And so in the absence of having emotional support from their primary caregivers, these turtles grow up into adults who don't depend on others. They pride themselves on being independent, autonomous, and not needing anybody. And when they come into a relationship, their biggest fear is being judged as being defective. Another way of saying this is rejection is their biggest fear. So we've got hailstorms who fear abandonment, which is being left alone, and turtles who fear rejection, which is being judged as being deficient in some way. And so when the turtle retreats, it triggers the hailstorm's biggest fear of abandonment, and then they start doing their insecurely attached thing, hailing down on the turtle. And then when the hailstorms, the turtle's biggest fear of being rejected and judged as deficient gets triggered because of all the criticism coming down from the hailstorm. So they retreat more. And this couple go round and round and round and round in circles until the relationship either ends or they get really stuck and either break up or just survive it. So what I'm trying to say is that you're probably, like me, a hailstorm or some version of a hailstorm, because hailstorms, one of their primary traits is they tend to need a lot of attention and reassurance. It's actually a bid for reassurance that you've got my back. And as my primary source of survival in the world, remembering that love is a survival bond, I need to know that I can count on you to be there for me when I need you. So I need the attention, not because I'm insecure, I need to feel good about my ego, but because I need feedback that we're still a team, and I can trust that if I get into distress, you will have my back. And Dr. John Gottman, the famous relationship researcher, calls this a bid. When we reach out to our partner in non-direct, indirect ways to get a response from them. So we might say, honey, hey, look outside. There's a ship floating by, a big Navy ship. Isn't that beautiful? Wow, we don't see that often. Or my stepdaughter came to me the other day and said, hey, Bruce, look, dolphins. She didn't really care that I saw the dolphins. What she cared was that I responded to her warmly. so
Yeah.
that she felt safe knowing we're in rapport,
Yeah.
we're in relationship. And we do this 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 times a day with our partners. Like my wife comes up with a cup of coffee for breakfast in the morning. She brings me coffee in bed. Or I go down and give her a kiss. It's not about the coffee or the kiss. It's about the response we get back.
So
And I'm going to pause there because I could go on for hours about it.
super interesting because some things were very, very relevant. And just as a background, my mom, after she delivered me, she was very sick. So for half a year, she was actually in the hospital. So I barely saw her. So
Wow.
there may be
Wow.
an explanation why I'm
Mm-hmm.
why I require the attention. But what I want to ask, so if you find out that you are one of those not the simple ones to connect to, whether a hailstorm or a turtle, do you change yourself, or do you want to change your partner? That's probably the worst thing you want to do. Or do you just adjust and you acknowledge what you are? Because I have hard times changing after. I mean, I'm 42. Of course, I can become better, but I don't know if I can essentially change.
Exactly. I'm 46 and I'm still, I call myself a recovering hailstorm. And what I mean by that is that I'm recovered in that I've learned more effective ways of getting my needs met that don't result in my partner withdrawing, or that don't result in us being completely disconnected. So securely attached people, when they feel anxious and insecure, instead of doing some form of protest behavior, they generally do one of two things very well. They will be vulnerable and share with their partner vulnerably what's going on. And I define vulnerability as emotional honesty. So they're being honest about their emotions. I'm like, honey, I'm feeling scared and insecure that you haven't responded to my text message in 18 hours. I miss you and I'm worried and wondering if you're okay and we're okay. That would be an example of being vulnerable. The second thing they'll do well is they'll ask for what they need directly. They'll go, I need a hug. I need some reassurance that we're good. And they have no worries doing this.
Can I throw a little bit of a thing inside?
Please.
So even if you can train yourself to behave like that, because I can control myself quite well, yes. And I can say what really is going on. What if your partner doesn't respond in a very mature way?
Well, what's probably going to happen is your partner's also insecurely attached. They're probably your reciprocal opposite in some way, shape, or form. And they're also going to respond with their protest behavior. Mm-hmm. And when they respond with theirs and you are responding with yours, a fight will escalate and the two of you will end up both feeling hurt. And eventually you'll end up both retreating out of the relationship and withdrawing to lick your wounds. What I train couples to do is to come together and support and help each other. So just to backtrack 1 minute quickly and finish the thought about, hang on a second, I got to get it back. About
dealing with your insecurities.
Right. So we'll probably always be hailstorms for the rest of our lives. We don't have to act like them. Just like you've said, you've become good and you're able to control yourself. What's more important than even that is that the two of you learn how to operate as a team and regulate each other and calm each other down. And then your relationship becomes what Dr. Stan Tatkin, who's a famous attachment researcher and therapist, he calls secure functioning. So the two of you may both be insecurely attached, but your relationship feels secure. Your partner understands that you have, a raw spot around, or a sensitive spot around abandonment. You understand they have a sensitive spot around rejection, most likely. I'm just talking about the two archetypes. And you stop sticking your finger in their old wounds and pushing those buttons. And then the two of you learn how to comfort each other. And so one of the hardest things to get through to a couple is that independence is the killer of relationships. And independence is a prerequisite for relationships to be successful, but it's also the killer if it's the end game. So we develop from being born into complete dependence in our parents. You're a mother, you've had children who are completely dependent on you. None of us have a choice around our dependence when we're children. And then ideally, as a mother, your job is to ensure your children grow up to be independent of you.
Mm-hmm.
But most of us think that independence is the end game. And so we come to relationships unable to actually truly bond because we're still trying to remain independent completely. But in order to graduate from being two separate people into a couple, we need to become interdependent. And the way I think of interdependence is that it's a combination of being able to be healthily dependent when you need to be and healthily independent. So you have this flexible interdependence, whereas like when I'm sick, I know I can count on you to call the doctor, to go buy me medicine, to bring me soup, and you have my back. But other than that, when I'm not sick and I'm feeling good, I can support you, encourage you, lift you up, and you can support me, encourage me, lift me up, and we become interdependent. Now, what often happens is hailstorms are overly dependent and turtles are overly independent. And you get this dynamic of the hailstorm chasing the turtle around the relationship. And what both people need to learn to do is come back to the middle and flex and flow together.
A lot of the theories are very good if they are perfect in a sense, or if they are being applied perfectly. So I understand, and nobody denies that for a relationship, you need to have both people playing the game. It has to work. For it to work, both people have to take part in this effort and to have the same, at least intention. But often we are in a relationship already. And I'm not talking about myself, by the way. I'm out of a relationship by now, but we often are in a relationship already with someone, and it's not guaranteed that the other person wants to play along with you. But maybe it is an important relationship. So what do you do if you are in a relationship with a person like that who just refuses and says, "I am what I am," and we either make it work like this or not? Is there any chance, or do you just exit the relationship and find someone who's more willing to cooperate?
Well, yes, there is a chance, because I work firstly with hopeless case couples where I'm working with one partner in the relationship, and very often we're able to turn things around because a relationship is a lot like a seesaw. And just like on a seesaw, when one partner shifts their weight, the other one is forced to move in response. And so when I'm working with one, let's say, for example, I'm working with a hailstorm. They usually, in our archetypical overgeneralization here, and I am overgeneralizing, I'll acknowledge that, they usually attract turtles. So when the hailstorm understands that their criticism, their demanding to have their needs met in the moment triggers their turtle into retreat, and the hailstorm stops doing that and instead opens up and starts being vulnerable, very often the reluctant turtle will poke their head out of their shell and go, "Oh, okay, I feel safe now. I can come out and meet your need." Very, very often. So often what looks like one person not wanting to be vulnerable and not wanting the same kind of relationship is actually a very scared partner who's feeling criticized and facing their worst fear of rejection inside their turtle shell, trying to protect themselves from being hurt. Not somebody who's just being difficult and doesn't want a relationship or doesn't want the same kind of relationship. Sometimes it is, though. And so what I'll very often have to get a couple to do in the beginning is have a difficult conversation around, what's your definition of relationship? Is it partnership or is it friends with benefits? And for many turtle-y type people, it's not partnership, it's not dependence, because turtles pride themselves on being independent and not needing anyone. And that is not a formula for joining together and creating a team. You've got to be able to partner. Now, when we really dig in further, often the reason why turtles don't want to partner is because they've never had a good experience of partnership. Their parents didn't partner with them, and every time they got partnered with, they were hurt, desperately hurt. And hailstorms don't see how they re-trigger their turtles' wounds, and turtles don't see how they re-trigger their hailstorms' wounds. So a big part of this is education. And I also used to believe that if a relationship was right, it should just work easily. But I now have completely changed my mind. And I like to use learning how to drive as a metaphor for explaining why None of us have a clue about relationships, and we shouldn't be allowed to get into one before we've had some education. And it's a little like this. If you remember learning how to drive, and you're my age, so you probably learned how to drive on a stick shift, right? Do you remember?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, okay, me too. So imagine getting into the car for the first time and nobody told you what the stick shift was for, or what the 3 pedals in front of you were for, and you had to figure the whole thing out on your own. You would absolutely crash, possibly kill yourself or others before you ever figured it out, if you ever figured it out on your own. It's just too complex. The system of a car is too complex for any individual to figure out on their own without hurting themselves or being a danger on the road to others. Because, you know, how do you ever balance the clutch and the accelerator? That took weeks of practice with an instructor sitting next to you, telling you exactly what to do. And it was terrifying, and on your own, you'd never get it. A relationship is the same. There are so many moving parts between 2 people. There's your history, their parents, your parents, the dynamic you co-create. There is no way you would ever figure out the relational dynamic between the 2 of you on your own. If you're lucky enough to find somebody that you just click with that has similar values, great. But most of us don't. Most of us fall in love with the most incompatible person in the universe for us, the person who's least qualified to meet our childhood needs and most qualified to make our worst nightmare come true. Why? Because according to Dr. Havel Hendricks and his wife Helen Hunt, they theorize that we are drawn to the people that most remind us of our primary caregivers, because that's how we learned love felt like. So if you grew up in an abusive family household with a father who beat you and a mother who yelled at you, that was your first experience of love. You will unconsciously seek out partners to recreate that experience of love, even if you're consciously not wanting to. Even if you go, never, ever, ever, ever again will I ever be in that situation, you will be drawn to those kind of people unconsciously, because that's what love feels like. So to your point, I don't think any of us could ever figure this out on our own. I don't think it's our fault that our relationships get into trouble, but there is something we can do about it. And if you're sitting around waiting for the ideal relationship, the perfect relationship that just clicks, you're probably going to be waiting a long time.
So do you work, I know you work with couples, do you work with people who are looking for relationships? Is there anything you can tell for them? Like,
yes, I do. Probably 10% of my clients are single people who've had so much pain from their previous relationships that they've smartly started to think, as I did, you know what the common denominator is in all my failed relationships? Me. I am the common denominator in all my failed relationships. And that's actually was the insight that got me to start learning about relationships. And that's when those people come to me and they go, I don't want to do this again anymore. I can see I'm the common denominator in all my failed relationships. I need to educate myself. It's a very small percentage of my clients, only probably 10%. But yes, and I really believe, just like learning to drive a car, you don't need therapy to drive a car. You need education to drive a car. You don't, for most couples, you don't need therapy to have a successful relationship. You need education, because it's not that you're incapable or you're stupid. It's just nobody ever taught you the distinctions that make a relationship work. And it doesn't take that long.
Thank you. I think it's a huge, it's a huge thing that you said you don't need therapy for it to work. You need education, because often we are very extreme. You either don't need any help or you need, you know, bringing back to life, but something is just missing. I want to move a little to a slightly different level of discussion, because I have so we were born in a different era. And I remember my first relationships were very different. I've never had a problem creating relationships. In the old days, we did everything live. We had, you know, live communication with people. And even now, I'm surrounded by a lot of colleagues who are much younger than me. And I know that I can beat them with my real life communication skills. And, you know, I don't hide behind the screens and internet and all sorts of layers of technology technology to communicate with people. But statistics, or at least research, shows that young people are avoiding connection to a great degree. They're not as comfortable as our generation was with real life connection. And on one side, we are so much in the spotlight because we have many more friends nowadays than we used to have 20 years ago. And I mean virtual friends, of course. But still the connections are not there. Is it just me imagining these things, or is that happening to the world? And what can we do to, at least me with my children, how can I prevent that problem going deeper? Because I've even read research that young people avoid having sex and having relationships, and marriages are going down and people can't commit. And it worries me. I don't want my children to live in, lonely single life when they grow up.
Yeah. I totally relate, and I have the exact same worries as you. I live with a 19-year-old and a 23-year-old, and most of their time is spent like this, right, looking at their phone. And so you're right. I think we've become used to communicating virtually, and the intimacy of communicating face-to-face and being vulnerable is something that younger people are not always used to. And it feels vulnerable, it feels scary. It's much safer to communicate with a WhatsApp voice message or a little text message or an emoji than to say, I love you. I'm thinking of you. You mean the world to me, whatever the case may be. And I don't have the answers. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not a parenting expert. I have the hardest job in the world, which is to be a stepdad or a step-parent. I read somewhere that being a step-parent is the hardest job in the world because the children don't trust you, and you're the new person in their lives. And what we've started doing is restricting internet time as a way of helping the children get off their phones. And literally, I've gone into our internet router and set a connection for the IP address of their phones, turn off after 8 p.m. So basically, the internet stops working after 8 p.m. in our house. And we sit down for dinner. So we create rituals where we can connect breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We have agreements like no devices at the table. We try and go out for walks as much as we can, in a little area that under lockdown here, and do things together as a family. And as a stepdad, I try to initiate vulnerable, meaningful conversations at the dinner table as much as I can to try and engage my stepchildren and the family together to open up and be vulnerable and teach them that being emotionally honest actually can be a beautiful experience that's safe. I don't have all the answers, and I know what you mean about, I can imagine sex is going down as people start to turn to porn. I was thinking about this the other day. Our generation grew up before streaming video. And so we were kind of like on the cusp of it. So for me, it was Playboy magazines underneath my dad's bed. Okay. And that was kind of as virtual as it got. The rest all happened in real life. Now, I think the current generation are growing up thinking that porn is what's normal, and that kind of sex is what normal sex actually looks like. And I think it's going to result in some very difficult relationships later on where there are going to be mismatched expectations. And I mean, I can see it already in my 19-year-old stepdaughter, whose whole view of the world is, I need to be a pretty skinny Instagram girl. And so I think,
oh God, and she's an introvert as well. It must be pretty tough.
An introvert as well, and we've discovered she's bulimic, and so there's all this stuff that comes from the internet. And I mean, I'm not saying bulimia comes from the internet, but it's exaggerated by our digital world, where our ability to connect with other people is so enhanced that often we end up connecting with Instagram models and thinking that's what's real life. I think, to be honest, between you and I think we're the lucky ones. We're the last generation that grew up without digital technology everywhere. And so we still know how to connect in real human form. Like I still have phone of my friends without telling them I'm about to phone them. I just pick up the phone and say, "Hey, Eric, how you doing, buddy? Like, what's going on? What are you up to?" And I love that when it happens to me. I still knock on my friends' doors. I just show up, knock on the door. "Hey, you free? Want to have a coffee?" Like, that doesn't happen.
We would come to the door, to the windows of a friend and yell, "Hey, Helen, are you there? Come on."
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
That's amazing. But I want to ask another spin on that, and I'm not sure what's your position on this, because I know that this is a growing popularity among relationship coaches, is suggesting people take certain psychedelics to learn to be vulnerable. Which I think is another interesting nail in the coffin of our ability to connect. So I'm not sure actually which clan are you in, but what do you think of that when people actually are looking for some kind of external ways to give them permission to be themselves, like to take psychedelics or alcohol or some kind of certain situations and environments where they are given permission to actually say something which normally they wouldn't dare.
Mm-hmm. I think it can be very powerful under professional guidance, not just some shaman or some dude who bought a pack of MDMA and is like going, "Hey, let's do couples therapy with MDMA." I don't buy into that at all. However, I'm not sure that it's permission that people need in order to open up. I think so. I don't support necessarily, just the recreational use of psychedelics. I think the recreational use of psychedelics can be horribly damaging. And I have a family member who's a schizophrenic, and it triggered schizophrenia in them from psychedelics. So I know the damage that psychedelics can do. And I believe in skilled hands, psychedelics can often help us overcome fear. I think it's not that we need permission to open up. I think it's that we're terrified of opening up. We're terrified of being seen and rejected or judged or abandoned or hurt. And so we build protective walls around our heart that are often too much for us to break down by ourselves. And in skilled hands and a good therapist, psychedelics can break down these walls. And this is why MDMA therapy is about to be legalized in the United States, because it works so well for trauma victims who've got walls so high and so thick around their hearts because they were so abused, or they were in war and they saw such horrifying things. They cannot drop those walls because those walls were never consciously erected. They were unconsciously erected by the amygdala in the back of the brainstem. And we can't control our amygdala. There's a great story, I think it was Carl Jung or Albert Einstein, one of the two, used to go to the zoo and would go to the snake pit and find a cobra and provoke the cobra to strike at him through the glass, of course, knowing that he couldn't get hurt because there was a big thick layer of glass in front of him. And what he wanted to do was to see if he could stop himself from flinching every time the cobra struck at the glass. And throughout his 50 years of doing this, he never once was able to not flinch, because it was his amygdala that was flinching. Although he consciously knew he was safe, he couldn't control his amygdala. And I think where psychedelics help is helping us control our amygdala so that we can open up and drop those walls. Well, helping the amygdala drop the walls. And we can say the things that we may not be able to say when, in normal daily life, and learn in a controlled environment that bad things don't happen. When we open up and we're that vulnerable, actually, it turns out okay, so that I can go back into normal life and not need psychedelics anymore in order to open up and be vulnerable.
But my question is more, okay, I get the idea why it's used in therapy, but it's also, and I'm not talking just about psychedelics, I'm also talking about, let's say, alcohol or any kind of any kind of substance that relaxes your natural desire to protect yourself. I'm wondering, how do people draw the line? Because yes, if you go to a therapist, if you do it as part of a process, I get it, but it's so.
What you're talking about is self-medicating,
and so many people would say, like, let's connect, let's take it, and we'll have a better connection. What do you think
I don't think
of that fad?
No, I don't buy into that at all. That's self-medicating, and that's trying to numb your feelings rather than facing your feelings, and that's not sustainable. Otherwise, you have to become an alcoholic in order to connect. If you need alcohol every time you're going to connect, and unfortunately, that is the case for many people. So I don't do any of that. I learn. Well, I attempt to help couples learn how to drop as much of their guard together through feeling safe. And there's a wonderful saying that goes, safety is not the absence of danger. Safety is the presence of predictability. When we perceive that we can predict that somebody's behavior won't hurt us, we feel safe around them. And so I think one of the most important things to help with feeling safe is to restore predictability. And an easy way to do this is to start installing connection rituals in your daily lives. So, one of the simplest things you can do is to appreciate each other every day, or to kiss each other goodbye when one of you leaves for work, or to hug each other before you go to sleep, or when you wake up in the morning, to say, I love you when you wake up in the morning. If you ritualize these, like wake up, leaving for work, falling asleep, these are all things that happen regularly every day. If you put rituals for connection into each one of these daily moments, then very quickly, like within a month or two, your felt sense of safety massively rises. Your brain starts producing more oxytocin, which is the cuddle hormone, which is like the feeling of being in love. And you naturally start taking more risks about opening your heart with your partner. That's a better way to do it than,
Yeah, I would agree. I was just trying to, I don't know, it just came to my mind that often because we don't have an easy way to get over the fear, and what I see around is people trying to feel better. So even some of the rituals of the parties, they come across as something ritualistic and something which people do nowadays. Tribal. And maybe it's my Soviet past that I'm so reluctant to any of that. I'm wondering, are there any natural ways of developing this courage to connect? And I'm not talking about the couples. I get the rituals with the couples, it's something sweet and nice, but to open up to the world where you don't need to go to a party and pop an MDMA because you're just so introverted and you're scared to connect to people. When you go to a party, you don't need to have 3 glasses of wine before you start actually flirting with the opposite sex and trying to make a connection. Are there any ways to learn all of that? Because we might all understand that this is not the right way, but still, if you look around, so many people resort to that because this is easier.
Totally. Okay. Absolutely, yes. And if we zoom out and look at how to do that, it involves the balance of challenge on one hand and support on the other. There's a guy called John DeMartini, a great teacher you probably know, who teaches this idea beautifully. So the only way to get comfortable with things we're scared of is to face our fear. There is no other way. But how are you going to face your fear if it's so scary you can't even look it in the eye? Well, you need to have support.
You can't even breathe.
This is what, you can't even breathe because you're so terrified of the thing that you're terrified of that it freaks you out. That's when you need support. And the best support you could get is go find a good therapist and face your fear step by step gradually. Or in my case, I'm just going to keep bringing it back to relationships. Often your partner can be your best therapist in that, not that they're doing therapy with you, but they can give you, if you have a secure relationship, that sense of, I have support. If this goes horribly wrong, my partner's on my side. They've got my back. I'm going to take that risk and face my fear. And the research actually shows that couples in secure relationships make more money, take more risks, succeed more in their career, can live up to 10 years longer than couples in insecure relationships because of that sense of support. Like, I've got somebody who's got my back in case everything goes wrong. Now, if it's your partner you need the courage to open up with, then, you know, it just takes gulp, or it takes a therapy. It takes a good therapist. But often, I mean, my path has been gulp, like, oh my God, here we go again. I'm facing my fear. Okay, deep breaths, Bruce, jump off the cliff. Let's see how this goes. Oh, that wasn't so bad. The water's warm. Okay, I can try that again. And it starts with taking that first step. And I'm trying to get my 23-year-old stepson to do this right now, who's a millennial and terrified of the world. And taking his first steps, I can see how hesitant he is to face his fear. And it's so beautiful to see, and it's mostly around girls. It's around talking to girls. Mm-hmm. And it's so beautiful to see him building his confidence through taking small steps. So I think the secret is small steps with support.
Mm. So find someone to support you, a wingman.
Yeah, I mean, like a good therapist, a professional, not just anybody, somebody who knows how to support you and who can, you know, help you when you fall on your face and help you, you know, depending on whatever the challenge is. But when it comes to vulnerability and opening up and facing our fears, then I think a good therapist or a secure relationship either can be as effective.
It's nice you mentioned your son, because I suddenly realized that this is coming as well. And as we were talking, that young people are less skilled at connection.
Yeah.
They still need also a little more support with that. I have to ask that before we end, because we were talking about relationship and you know, going into a relationship or being vulnerable and open. Do you have any hints on how to deal with rejection? Because that's part of this game. How to not let that derail you.
So can you be a little more specific around, like, are you talking about rejection in a relationship? Mm-hmm. And do you mean,
yes,
you mean like your partner says, I'm breaking up with you?
Yes, either that, or if you're like trying to make a relationship, yeah, either partner who is leaving you. But I guess these are different things when you are attempting to make a relationship and you're rejected versus when somebody rejects you with whom you have been in a relationship. But generally, yes, a rejection in a relationship. Is there anything you can keep in mind to help you sail out of that and not feel like you don't want to even try anymore?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So firstly, I hate rejection, terrified of rejection, and it feels horrible. And maybe it's age and wisdom. Maybe it's my self-esteem's built as I've gotten a little bit older. I don't know. But right now I've come to the personal realization that if somebody rejects me, it's not because I'm flawed. It's because they don't feel attraction to me for whatever reason. And then I had to think, well, actually, 99.9% of people I don't feel attraction to. So the odds of somebody not being attracted to me are incredibly high. The odds of somebody actually wanting to be in a relationship with me are incredibly low when I think about who I'm attracted to. I'm attracted to a very small group of people. And so I stopped taking it so personally. But I think the thing that helped me the most with rejection was understanding personality typing. I'm a personality typing geek. And I got deep into personality typing. And what I took away from understanding personality typing was that there are a lot of very, very different people out there. And I am one of a small group of people who have my personality type, approximately 2-3% of the planet. And that means that I'm not going to be right for everybody, and that's okay. And I think it started with doing a lot of healing work and therapy on myself, that I learned that I'm okay. I like me, actually, and I'm okay. And if somebody doesn't like me, that's totally okay too. That's not my area of expertise, self-esteem. So I can only really share from my own perspective of learning to accept myself and raising my standards as a result. In that, you know, if somebody doesn't like the way that I am, that's no grounds for a relationship. And to try to drag them and convince them to come into the relationship is like trying to convince a cat to go swimming in the swimming pool. It's never going to be a happy experience for either of you. The cat's going to scratch you. They're going to be upset. You're going to be bleeding. Both of you will be wet. Not good, you know. So rather find, a dolphin who likes to swim than try and get a cat to swim. That's the way I look at it. I just stopped trying to.
It's actually curious because I thought that was part of your job, because I'm sure that of the couples who come to be saved, some must end up in actually breaking up completely and
Yes,
rejected.
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and it's mostly because there's what I call a requirement that hasn't been met. A requirement is like a deal breaker. It's a fundamental, I cannot be with you in this relationship unless this requirement is met. It's not an option. So it's like, I want babies and you want no children. You can't have half a baby. It's a requirement. I'm never going to be happy unless I have children, and you're never going to be happy with children. We're not a good match. Or I'm divorced, like my ex-wife and I. Part of what led to our divorce was I wanted to live in the country in the middle of nowhere on an island in the Caribbean. So I moved to the Turks and Caicos to go live with Eric and Elise. This was like 12 years ago. And she wanted to live in a city in central London. I took her to the island. I said, look at the beautiful beaches here. She was like, oh my God, I could never live here. It was part of what precipitated our divorce. It wasn't the real reason, but it was definitely a contributing factor. That was a requirement. Or I am sexually attracted and you're not. I often like to teach that sexual attraction is not a choice, not something you can decide. Sexual attraction is unconscious, just like fear is. It's driven by our amygdala. And I don't think you have any business being in a romantic relationship with a partner that you've never been sexually attracted to. I think it's normal that over time, sexual attraction moves in waves as you go through ups and downs in your relationships. But if you were never sexually attracted in the first place, what are you doing together? So in those cases, often it's better for the couple to go their separate ways and find people where their requirements can be met and they can fulfill each other and they want to fulfill each other's requirements like that. That's not the norm, though. Most of the couples I work with can be helped and are relatively easily helped.
Thank you. I suddenly realized we didn't talk about such an interesting topic as sexual attraction, but unfortunately our time is up. That would have been an interesting conversation too.
Next time.
And I have to be honest, the relationships is the area where I feel the least qualified to talk. You see, I even mixed my C words.
No worries.
I was lucky enough before marriage to have it easy, and I've been recently unmarried, so haven't had the chance to learn the art yet, but I guess maybe it's time. So thank you for educating me, and a
pleasure.
Thank you
for asking such interesting questions and being such a great interviewer. You obviously are curious and interested and smart yourself. You know a lot already, otherwise you wouldn't have asked the kinds of questions that you have, and it's been a joy to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for those who are watching us in recording, I want to traditionally ask to leave a heart for our guest, Bruce. Yes, thanks.
Thank you.
In the comments or anywhere, just leave a heart for the generosity, for coming over and for sharing your wisdom with us.
It's a pleasure. Kristina, could I offer a gift to your readers?
Yes.
Or viewers?
Yeah.
So I have a free, if you're in a relationship and you're struggling in your relationship, I have a free course that I offer couples that teaches you the basics of communication and connection and the basic education. And if any of you are interested and you're struggling in your relationship, just go to loveatfirstfight.com. That's with an F, Love at First Fight, not sight, fight. And just put your email address in there and I'll send you for 7 days a video every day that will give you the basics of understanding how your relationship dynamic got to the place where it was and what to do about it.
And how not to mix up C words in a relationship.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, and see you hopefully next week. Bye.
Bye.